Stories, Philippines podcast.
Here, the asphalt was not black in the pre-dawn dark. It was the color of pooled oil under an endless, suffocating sky. It was slick with night dew and the subtle, invisible slick of fear that always clung to these roads. Imagine a stretch of provincial highway, far from the city grid's reassuring, if harsh, glow. Here, the streetlights gave up long ago, bowing to the towering, whispering presence of the mountainside. It is here, on the spine of the country, where the concrete road cuts through the ancient domain of the wilderness, that the modern machine meets the oldest dread. The only sound is the frantic, buzzing drone of the engine, the beat of a single-cylinder motorcycle, the two-wheeled workhorse known as the Habal-Habal. It is the lifeline for the remote villages, a ferry across the dark rivers of the night. For the driver, it is a living; for the passenger, it is a gamble. But what if the passenger is not meant to be there? What if the weight pressing down on the back seat is cold, impossibly heavy at first, then suddenly, terrifyingly, gone? What if the journey is less a trip to a faraway home and more a guided tour through the realm of things that refuse to stay buried, things that ride along? The air itself shifts from the sharp, earthy smell of the forest to something cold and faintly metallic, like old coins or fresh grave dirt. The driver checks the side mirror, a nervous tick. He is looking for the light of his own headlights reflected in the eyes of his rider. He is looking for a face that should be there. Sometimes he sees it. Sometimes he sees the face of a beautiful woman, hair streaming in the wind, a face of devastating, unnatural sorrow. Other times, it is a pale, drawn face, a familiar face, a face that should have been cold in the ground for 3 years already. And then he looks again, and the mirror reflects only the vast, empty dark behind him. The passenger is gone. Yet, he feels the chill of their spectral grip lingering on his waist, a silence louder than the engine's roar. The speed does not matter, the distance does not matter. When you carry a memory or a curse, there is no outrunning it. Darkness permeates this episode, touching on scenes and themes some may find deeply unsettling. Listener vigilance is strongly advised. I am Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. The Philippines is an archipelago obsessed with journeys. We are an island nation, meaning every trip is a conquest of water or terrain, a passage fraught with risk and reliance on faith. In the city, fear often takes the form of paranoia, the hidden dangers in the crowd, the fear of the known human predator. But in the provinces, that dread shifts to something far older, far deeper, dread. It is the fear of the powerful, indifferent land itself and the entities that rule it. The Habal-Habal is the perfect vehicle for this kind of provincial dread. It is an extended motorcycle taxi, often dangerously modified to carry 4, 5, or even 6 people, sometimes with goods piled high, navigating treacherous mountain trails and unlit remote lanes. It is a symbol of necessity, of risk, and of the unique vulnerability of those who live far from the main roads. These drivers know the winding paths better than they know their own faces, and the spirits of the road know the drivers. The stories of the hitchhiking spirits are not new. They are a global parallel to the classic vanishing hitchhiker narratives that haunt the lonely highways of the United States, or the shadowy yuri found on the roadsides in Japan. But here, the spirit is often tied to the land, an entity of immense power known as the Encanto, a being that belongs to the ancient, towering trees and the deep, silent rivers. Take the experience of Aika, a young student who traveled back home to a secluded place called Nora Lane to celebrate the Christmas holidays. Her destination was one of those strange, liminal communities, a place of contradiction. It was an area of isolated mansions, of homeowners who had walled themselves off, forcing the local residents, the informal settlers, to take a ridiculously long, new route to access their homes. This new path was a mountain lane, remote and without streetlights, dark but for the occasional light spilling from an occupied house. To get there quickly, the habal-habal was required. Akia was already late. The tropical night had clamped down fully by the time she boarded her ride around 8 o'clock. The driver, helmeted and familiar sounding, asked, "How are you?" A common enough greeting, but it struck her as strange that she did not recognize his voice. It had been 3 years since her last visit. 3 years is a long time for a face, or a voice, to fade. The road itself was a gauntlet of sensory bombardment. The biting cold of the wind, what she described as a Tagaytay-like chill, was intense even for a tropical night. It was the kind of cold that seemed to come not just from the weather, but from the surrounding earth. Then they reached the river part of the lane, a space where the forest closed in completely, where no houses dared to stand. The moon was bright enough, she remembered, but the darkness was still profound. The driver stopped. "Slide over, young lady," the driver's voice, now strangely cool and gentle, instructed. "She's getting on." Aika moved obediently, assuming another passenger was joining them. But when she looked back, there was nothing. The space behind her was empty, the road silent. The realization hit her with sickening force. Why would anyone be waiting for a ride by a river in the middle of a dark, remote forest? She turned to face the driver, intending to question him, to tell him he must have been mistaken. But as she did, her eyes darted to the motorcycle's small side mirror. And in that glass, she saw a pale, undeniable face. It was the face of Joe, a local habal-habal rider. A rider who had been found hanged from a tree near that very river 3 years before. The driver she rode with was wearing a helmet, concealing his face, yet the mirror, that simple piece of reflective glass, had betrayed the truth. Aika froze, gripped by a fear so intense it was paralyzing. Her rational mind screamed at her to jump, to run, but her body was locked down. A moment later, the figure, still shrouded by the helmet, glanced back and said, "We are almost there." The voice was back to its previous familiar tone. The terror she felt was not just the encounter, but the implication. She had been alone with a specter on a motorcycle for miles, riding a ghost's ferry service through a ghost territory. She arrived safely, yes, but the trauma, the understanding of how close she had come to a fate tied to the road lingered. The memory of Joe's pale face in the mirror remains an unnerving, unsolved riddle. This experience, frightening as it is, speaks to a fundamental belief in Filipino culture. The distinction between the living and the dead is often porous, especially in the remote spaces where the living must constantly encroach upon the territory of the departed or the non-human. The dead often return to their routine, their work, their need, a desperate echo of life. The Encanto are woven into this fabric of provincial life. They are powerful nature spirits, often described as possessing devastating beauty or immense, terrible age. They are the landowners of the uncultivated world, a forest, a river bend, an ancient balete tree. These are not just geographic locations, they are the homes of the Encanto. In stories from all over the world, there are figures like the European Fae or the Japanese Kami, powerful beings who are not good or evil, but simply other. They follow rules incomprehensible to humans and they demand respect. Cross them, disrespect their territory, or fail to observe the unwritten laws of the wild, and you invite disaster. A driver passing an ancient tree at night must announce his presence, apologize for the disturbance. A builder must offer a small sacrifice to the ground before breaking earth. When these rules are ignored, the Encanto sometimes chooses to manifest, or simply to take. This deep-rooted dread of the unseen proprietors of the land can sometimes manifest in more insidious ways, merging folklore with deep human cruelty. The fear of the aswang, another powerful figure in the Filipino dread pantheon, focuses on a creature that looks human by day but transforms at night. A shapeshifter, a viscera eater, a blood drinker. The aswang is often geographically specific, most infamously tied to the province of Capiz, where the fear has become almost a cultural identifier. Jerry, an office worker from Manila in the early 2000s, learned of this dread through his friend Romel. Romel invited him to his family's remote barrio in Capiz. The trip involved a long ride from the main town, over 20 minutes deep into the countryside, a place where the air was cold, the power often failed, and the quiet was unnerving. Jerry immediately felt the weight of the place, the stares of the residents, a slow, measuring gaze that seemed to follow his every step. He dismissed it as provincial shyness toward a city dweller. The second night, the peace shattered. Jerry awoke in the dark, needing to use the bathroom located at the back of the house. As he walked, he heard the low murmur of voices coming from beneath the trees, a small gathering. The low voices of older men and women, some of them Ramel's relatives. But there were other voices too, strange and raspy. A sound that did not belong. He dismissed it as late-night gossip, until one clear sentence, a marker, sliced through the darkness. The sign is the ring on the left pinky finger. A cold, visceral shock ran through Jerry. He was wearing a ring on the pinky finger of his left hand, a graduation gift he never took off. He was the subject of the meeting, the slow stares, the heavy atmosphere. They were not shyness, they were surveillance. He realized he was not a guest, he was an offering. He did not complete his errand. He crept back to the room where Ramel was sleeping, or perhaps pretending to sleep. Jerry acted on instinct, on the primal need for self-preservation. He slipped the ring off his finger and carefully placed it onto Ramel's sleeping left pinky. Then he fled. He ran out into the dark, indifferent to the mud and the thorns, a desperate, blind flight away from the village. Every rustle of leaves, every breath of wind was a pursuing shadow. He eventually reached a neighboring barrio and found shelter in the home of an old couple. He poured out the story. The village, the whispers, the ring. The old man listened in silence and then gave him the chilling advice. Return tomorrow, but with the police. Collect his things and leave immediately. And one more thing, when you go back, see what they are celebrating. See if they have a lechon. The next day, Jerry returned with 2 policemen. There was indeed a celebration, and in the middle of the feast table, resting on a platter, was a whole roasted pig, a lechon. But it was not the ordinary feast centerpiece. All the family members, Ramel's relatives, averted their eyes. The warmth of the previous welcome was replaced by a cold, confused silence. They were staring at him, not with predatory intent this time, but with a bewildered, frustrated confusion. Their intended sacrifice was walking, breathing, and accompanied by the law. And then Jerry saw the ring. There it was, shimmering faintly, nestled in the charred, crispy skin of the lechon. Romel's intended fate had been served as the main course, and Rommel was gone, replaced by the marker of his friend's escape. This story, related by a man named MVD, illustrates how the fear of the aswang intertwines with the fear of the collective, the cult, the secret society. The aswang is not always a solitary monster. It can be a family, a clan, a community that practices a dark, generational tradition. The concept of the yanga, mentioned in another story by Lagaya, emphasizes this terror of contagion. The yangeao is a process of turning someone into an aswang, often through an offering of food or water laced with saliva, a slow, insidious poisoning of the spirit that turns the victim into a shapeshifter themselves. Tigaya, who hinted at a connection to the aswang herself, shared a similar trip to Capiz with classmates. She was already wary, watching the mother of her friend Christine with suspicion, noting how the woman avoided eye contact. When offered water, she refused, giving a casual excuse, remembering the insidious folklore of the Yangar. During the meal, she observed her friends, famished and joyous, digging into the feast, adobo, sinigang, and dinuguan, a stew made of pig blood. The smell, however, was wrong, a familiar, disturbing odor that caused her body to shake and her mind to battle an inner, predatory frenzy. It was the scent of something not animal, something other. When her friend Sani approached her, terrified, shaking, and unable to speak clearly, she finally pointed to the dinuguan. Sani had found a human fingernail in the blood stew. The realization caused the other friends, who had eagerly consumed the tainted food, to immediately vomit. They were horrified, but Ligaya's focus was on the mother, who simply approached, calm, asking what the matter was. Ligaya had to lie, feigning stomach trouble to prevent a confrontation that would have ended in certain violence and likely exposed her own terrifying nature. She had to save her friends without revealing the depths of her own darkness. Once they were safely out of the remote barrio, she gave them the traditional countercure for the yang gao, a medicinal oil and a ritual smoke. This blending of folklore with practical, if chilling, advice shows the pervasive reality of this belief system. The fear is not just of being eaten, it is the fear of becoming the thing that eats. These stories often hinge on moments of profound immediate realization. The ring on the lechon, the fingernail in the dinuguan, the face in the mirror. They are brief flashes of clarity that expose the dark reality hidden beneath the veneer of ordinary life. The constant risk of travel in remote areas provides the stage for these encounters. The provincial roads of the Philippines are not just pathways, they are portals. They cut through the domain of the encanto, they follow the forgotten trails of the dead, and they connect the relatively safe city to the unpredictable, ancient wilderness. Another young traveler, Jay, a high school student, was on his way to school one early morning. He recounted a series of unnerving events that led him to question the line between bad luck and true premonition. Before leaving his house, he tried to take a selfie in his room. The photos were inexplicably blurred. In the bathroom, his reflection looked pale, his lips darkened, and an inexplicable coldness set in. The camera continued to fail when he tried to take pictures of himself. Yet, later at school, when he used the same phone to photograph his professor's notes on the whiteboard, the image was perfectly clear. The camera refused to capture him, only the world around him. Later that day, after an anxious journey through a crowded city area, he decided to take a habal-habal near the massive Gateway Mall to get home faster. The driver seemed intoxicated. Before putting on the helmet, Jay glanced at the left side mirror, and once again, the mirror refused to show him. He looked directly at the glass, but his own face was absent. The driver accelerated to a terrifying speed on Marcos Highway, ignoring Jay's pleas to slow down. Jay finally demanded to be dropped off at the tropical area, a stop that cut short his ride. A different passenger immediately hopped on. Moments later, after Jay had boarded a much slower jeepney, traffic ground to a halt. The reason? An accident. The victim, the very habal-habalan driver he had just abandoned. The blurred photos, the pale reflection, the side mirror that showed only absence, these elements coalesced into a terrifying premonition. He had been marked. The phenomenon of the camera refusing to capture the image of a person is an ancient superstition, suggesting that the spirit is weak or that the person is already one step into the realm of the dead. Was he meant to be on that motorcycle when it crashed? Was the ghost in the mirror not the driver, but a dark reflection of his own near fate? He had only narrowly escaped a date with the spectral ferryman. In the case of Carl Bryan's friend, the encounter was more direct. In a remote barrio, the road itself held a grim history. It passed through a patch of bamboo forest that was rumored to be the old dumping ground for the bamboo poles used to carry coffins to the church for burial. The path was steeped in the residual energy of the dead. Around 11 o'clock one night, a habal-habal driver named Carl Bryan's friend was heading home alone. He stopped for a moment to relieve himself. When he finished, he heard footsteps. A boy, perhaps 14 or 16, dressed in a white shirt and blue pants like a student, emerged from the dark. The driver, relieved at the company, offered him a ride. The boy gratefully climbed aboard. The driver drove slowly, cautiously, but just after they had passed the haunted stretch of bamboo, the motorcycle suddenly felt lighter. He checked his side mirror. The seat behind him was empty. The boy was gone. The shock was paralyzing, then instantly replaced by a blinding, desperate need to flee. He sped home, ignoring the dangerous curves, convinced something had clung to his back seat and then simply vanished. Or worse, remained invisibly riding with him. He arrived home, shaking, drenched in cold sweat, and fell ill for days. The boy, the quiet hitchhiker, was an echo of the past, a spirit tied to the road of the dead, eternally looking for a ride out of his purgatory. The constant flow of these stories points to a collective cultural trauma surrounding sudden death and the indifference of the landscape. When a person dies suddenly, violently, or far from home, as in a road accident, their spirit is believed to be nagbabalik or naglilingkod, returning or serving the duty that was cut short. The habal-habal drivers, who constantly face the perils of the unlit, winding roads, are perhaps the most vulnerable to these encounters. Their job places them directly on the line between the human world and the domain of the encanto and the restless dead. Even the natural world, so beautiful and abundant in the provinces, can be a host for the uncanny. In Leyte, Kim and her sister were on a family trip. Her father recounted a local story about a huge, unnaturally large wild pig seen by a neighbor. It was chased, wounded on the leg, and disappeared into the dense woods. Days later, an elderly reclusive man in the barrio was seen with a mysterious, deep gash on his leg. The connection, though unspoken, was clear. The man was a shapeshifter, an aswang, or a related creature, moving between human and beast. Later, while swimming in a cold, clear spring, a place often considered the sacred domain of an encanto, Kim was fascinated by a small, translucent fish that seemed to hover, motionless against the current. She repeatedly pointed it out to her father, who sternly warned her to stop noticing things. Her curiosity was dangerous. Her father later revealed that the fish was believed to be a diwata, a nature spirit, the guardian of the spring. It was said to only show itself to children. These natural phenomena, the strangely large pig, the impossible fish, the cold wind, the deep, silent pools, are the fingerprints of the Encantor. They are manifestations of the powerful intelligence of the land, an intelligence that can be benevolent to the innocent but wrathful and deadly to those who fail to show respect. The stories of the roads, the forests, and the secluded villages are all connected by a common thread, the thin veil. There is no separation between the natural, the historical, and the supernatural. The road is haunted because it was the path of the dead. The woods are sacred because they are ruled by the encanto. The community is dark because a predatory fear has taken root, a fear that can transform into the monstrous ritual of the Aswang feast. Every time a driver revs his engine at night on a remote road, every time a traveler accepts a drink of water in a secluded home, they are crossing a boundary. They are entering into an ancient contract with the land and its occupants, a contract whose terms are always shifting, always unclear, and often deadly. The encounters, whether with the ghost of a dead driver seeking to fulfill his last route or with the cold, assessing gaze of a powerful encanto that simply permits passage, force a crucial question upon the listener. Is the danger external, or does it reside within the act of travel itself, the act of intrusion? Perhaps the fear is simply an acknowledgement of our own fragile place in a world that was here long before us, a world that is still governed by rules we cannot see. If you have experienced a vanishing passenger or a strange, silent journey through the deep Philippine night, we want to hear your story. Submit your stories to our email, storiesphpodcast@gmail.com. The memory lingers. The feeling of that cold, impossible weight on the back of the motorcycle seat, or the glimpse of a face in a mirror that should not be there. It's a moment of clarity that shatters all rational thought, leaving behind a cold residue of absolute dread. The world we build, the concrete roads, the buzzing motorcycles, the modern buildings, is merely a thin skin over a much older, darker reality. And sometimes, in the dead of the night, when the lights fail and the wind howls, that ancient world pushes back, demanding a fare, or perhaps a life, for the passage it allows. Find show notes and support options in the description. Access exclusive content on Patreon. Follow us on social media for daily folklore facts. What if the most dangerous part of the journey is not the destination, but the moment you realize you are no longer alone on the road? The road is long and the night is full of eyes. Thank you for tuning in and sharing this journey with us. Listen to our past episodes for more stories of the unseen Philippines, and join us next time for another descent into the dark heart of the archipelago. Do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast. Support the podcast financially in ways you can find in the show notes. Good night.